How did humans first discover that cold could save a life? Not through science, not through any grand insight. Almost certainly it happened by pure accident, somewhere on a frozen northern tundra, when a piece of meat left forgotten inside a snowdrift turned out, days later, to be remarkably, surprisingly, still good. That single, ordinary discovery is where this entire documentary genuinely begins. Early humans living near frozen lakes and glaciers noticed something worth paying attention to. Food packed in snow lasted considerably longer than food left out in the open air. There was no chemistry here, no understanding of bacteria or decomposition, just careful, repeated observation. Meat stayed firm, meltwater tasted clean, and massive, ancient glaciers, permanent even through summer, offered proof that this strange, solid form of water could genuinely persist far longer than anyone initially expected. Search "Why does ice preserve food today?" and modern science will explain bacteria growth slows dramatically in cold temperatures. Exactly the mechanism prehistoric humans stumbled upon completely by accident, with zero understanding of microbiology whatsoever. But here's the twist worth remembering throughout this entire documentary: ice was never simply a convenience. It was also genuinely, seriously dangerous. Thin ice on a frozen lake could give way without warning, plunging an unsuspecting hunter into freezing water within seconds. Entire communities learned, sometimes through devastating personal experience, exactly how to judge safe ice thickness, knowledge passed forward carefully from one generation toward the next. Meanwhile, in considerably warmer regions near the equator, entirely different communities encountered ice only rarely, through occasional hailstorms, watching these strange, temporary pellets melt away within minutes beneath the tropical sun. Imagine seeing solid, frozen water for the very first time in your entire life, having absolutely no context for what you were witnessing. That genuine sense of wonder and confusion appears again and again throughout ice's entire recorded history. By the time this opening chapter closes, humanity had already learned two fundamentally important lessons: ice preserves, and ice can kill. Those two lessons, working together, would eventually inspire one of history's most genuinely ingenious engineering achievements. One built not in a frozen northern forest, but somewhere considerably more surprising, right in the middle of a scorching desert. Is it actually possible to make ice in the middle of a scorching desert, with no electricity, no machinery, nothing but sand, water, and clever architecture? Ancient Persian engineers proved it was, and they did it roughly 2,400 years ago, building a remarkable structure called the Yakhchal, a name that literally translates as ice pit. Here's how this genuinely ingenious system worked. Engineers constructed a towering conical dome using a specialized heat-resistant mortar called sarouge, a precise mixture of sand, clay, egg whites, lime, goat hair, and ash. Beneath this structure, they excavated a substantial insulated pit. Nearby, underground channels called qanats delivered water from distant mountain sources into shallow, exposed pools positioned carefully beside tall shading walls. On clear desert nights, even with daytime temperatures well above body heat, that shallow water genuinely lost enough warmth through radiative cooling to freeze completely solid by morning. Workers collected this fresh ice before sunrise, storing it carefully within the Yakhchal's deep, thermally protected underground chamber. Properly insulated, that ice could genuinely last throughout the entire scorching summer season. Ask yourself honestly, would you have believed this was possible, using nothing but 13th century BCE technology and a genuine understanding of physics nobody had a name for yet? Search Yakhchal today, and you'll find these structures still appear in modern sustainable architecture courses. Engineers genuinely studying ancient passive cooling principles for inspiration toward building energy-efficient structures right now. In our own supposedly far more advanced century, this remarkable innovation spread rapidly throughout the growing Persian Empire, and soon, royal households and wealthy citizens were enjoying chilled drinks and delicate frozen desserts flavored with rosewater and fruit syrup, right in the heart of one of Earth's hottest, driest climates. Merchants sold ice in busy marketplaces. Physicians used it for treating fever. An entire civilization had solved something that should have been, by any reasonable expectation, genuinely impossible. Remarkably, several of these ancient Yakhchal towers still stand today across modern Iran, drawing fascinated tourists who can hardly believe ancient engineers achieved this without a single modern tool. But Persia wasn't alone in valuing ice this highly. Across the ancient world, entirely separate civilizations were independently reaching the exact same conclusion, using their own remarkably different methods. Why would ancient Egyptians, Chinese emperors, Greek philosophers, and Roman senators all independently decide that ice deserved genuine royal treatment? Because across every single one of these civilizations, without any contact whatsoever, ice consistently represented one thing: undeniable, considerable luxury. In ancient Egypt, workers filled shallow, porous clay pots with water, setting them outside during clear, cold desert nights. The porous clay allowed rapid evaporative cooling, and by morning, a delicate layer of ice had formed, harvested quickly before the rising sun could destroy it. In ancient China, workers cut substantial ice blocks from frozen northern rivers, packing them carefully within insulated underground pits alongside straw. This preserved supply, reserved specifically for the imperial court's comfort throughout China's demanding summer heat. Meanwhile, in ancient Greece, dedicated runners physically carried mountain snow down steep pathways toward Athens, where wealthy citizens mixed it with honey and fruit for a genuinely refreshing treat. And in Rome, servants retrieved snow from distant mountains entirely, storing it within deep villa cellars insulated with straw and packed earth, ready to chill wine at elaborate, considerable aristocratic feasts. Notice something remarkable here. None of these civilizations ever communicated with one another about ice. No shared trade route carried this particular idea between Egypt, China, Greece, and Rome. Each culture, working entirely alone, arrived independently at the exact same conclusion about cold water's genuine value. Here's a question worth genuinely sitting with. How much labor, expense, and logistical effort did wealthy ancient elites willingly invest just to experience something as simple as a cold drink? The answer, across every single civilization we've examined, was consistently enormous. And that tells us something genuinely important about ice's cultural significance long before refrigeration existed. It wasn't just comfort. It was status. It was power. It was proof that you commanded resources ordinary people simply couldn't access. Romans even applied ice medicinally, using it to treat fever, an early therapeutic use that would echo forward through medieval European medicine as well. From Persia to Egypt to China to Rome, one substance kept appearing at the very center of ancient wealth, health, and power. But Europe was about to take this obsession somewhere entirely new, building considerable, dedicated infrastructure specifically around preserving winter's frozen gift. Would you build an entire stone structure just to keep frozen water cold through summer? Medieval European aristocrats genuinely did, constructing dedicated ice houses with thick, insulated stone walls, purpose-built structures existing solely to preserve winter's harvest for as long as humanly possible. Every winter, workers cut substantial ice blocks from estate lakes, transporting them carefully toward these specialized icehouse structures. There, they packed the ice tightly with straw and sawdust insulation, sealing it away from the coming summer heat. Months later, castle stewards would retrieve this preserved supply for elaborate aristocratic feasts, serving chilled wine and delicate frozen confections that genuinely impressed considerable wealthy dinner guests. Search medieval icehouse today, and you'll discover many of these stone structures still stand across the English and European countryside, quietly preserved centuries later as genuine architectural curiosities rather than functioning cold storage. Here's the uncomfortable truth this chapter reveals. Ice remained almost entirely exclusive throughout medieval Europe, restricted to those wealthy enough to maintain considerable dedicated storage infrastructure. Ordinary townspeople watched aristocratic servants transport this valuable commodity with genuine curiosity, fully aware this particular luxury remained completely beyond their own practical reach. Even monasteries maintained modest ice houses, primarily for treating fever and preserving medicine. This practical application inherited directly from earlier Roman medical tradition. Estate owners actually competed with one another over whose ice house remained best stocked, whose feast offered the most impressively chilled dishes. It became genuine social currency, a visible marker of considerable wealth and sophistication throughout aristocratic European society. This exclusive arrangement persisted essentially unchanged for centuries, ice remaining a luxury good rather than any genuine daily necessity for ordinary people. That would eventually change, but not through any European innovation at all. The genuinely transformative breakthrough came from an entirely unexpected source. An ambitious young American merchant standing on a frozen Boston harbor, staring at frozen water everyone else considered completely worthless, and seeing something nobody else had ever quite imagined: a genuine, if genuinely audacious, business opportunity. Would you risk your entire fortune shipping frozen water toward the tropics, genuinely believing people would actually pay for something guaranteed to melt? In 1806, young Boston merchant Frederic Tudor did exactly that, loading substantial ice blocks aboard a ship bound for the Caribbean island of Martinique, against the genuine, considerable skepticism of nearly everyone around him. Consider the sheer financial risk involved here: shipping costs, crew wages, and a cargo that actively disappeared the moment it left port. Nearly every rational businessman of his era would have called this venture genuine financial madness from the very beginning. The voyage proved genuinely brutal. Considerable quantities of ice melted steadily throughout the demanding tropical crossing, and when Tudor finally arrived, local residents had absolutely no idea what to do with this strange, rapidly disappearing substance. He struggled desperately to sell his remaining product, patiently demonstrating how ice could chill beverages and preserve food, gradually persuading skeptical customers to try this entirely unfamiliar commercial product for themselves. Here's a question worth genuinely considering: how many people would have simply given up after that first, genuinely disastrous venture? Tudor lost considerable money. His idea seemed genuinely foolish to nearly every observer, and yet he returned to Boston determined, analyzing exactly what had gone wrong and what needed fixing. His breakthrough came through something remarkably simple: sawdust. This abundant, genuinely inexpensive byproduct from local lumber mills provided considerably more effective insulation than anything Tudor had previously attempted. His next shipment arrived with dramatically more ice intact, and this time, customers were genuinely ready to buy. Search Frederic Tudor Ice King today, and you'll find this exact story still fascinating business historians nearly 2 centuries later. A genuine case study in entrepreneurial persistence, overcoming seemingly impossible odds. From a single, humiliating failure, Tudor built the foundation for what would soon become one of 19th century America's most surprising, genuinely massive international commercial industries. And he was just getting started. How does a single failed businessman transform an inexpensive sawmill byproduct into a genuinely global commercial empire? Tudor's refined sawdust insulation technique worked so remarkably well that he immediately set his sights on an even more ambitious, considerably more challenging target: shipping ice all the way to Calcutta, India. Picture the sheer distance involved. New England to Calcutta represents one of the longest ocean voyages available anywhere on the entire planet during this era, making Tudor's earlier Caribbean venture look genuinely modest by comparison. The voyage was extraordinarily long, crossing considerable ocean distance through demanding tropical heat. When the ship finally arrived, curious crowds gathered at the harbor, genuinely astonished to witness this remarkable frozen cargo that had somehow survived such an extraordinarily lengthy journey. British colonial residents, desperate for any relief from India's punishing climate, purchased Tudor's ice eagerly, and local officials quickly commissioned a dedicated ice house to properly store future shipments. Here's what makes this genuinely remarkable stat. Within just a few years, Tudor's operation expanded dramatically. Additional ships regularly departing toward the Caribbean, South America, and considerable markets across Asia. Entire ice houses appeared steadily at ports worldwide, forming genuine international infrastructure supporting this single American export commodity. Back home, New England's ice harvesting operations expanded considerably to meet this growing global demand. Entire communities organizing their winter economy increasingly around this newly significant commercial industry. Competing merchants launched similar ventures, recognizing the genuine, considerable profitability Tudor had demonstrated so convincingly. Think about the sheer audacity of this achievement. An ordinary natural resource, something literally frozen on a New England pond, transformed into one of the era's most surprising international trade commodities, connecting distant, entirely unconnected corners of the globe. Local entrepreneurs in these tropical destinations built entirely new businesses around this imported American ice. Chilled beverage stands, early ice cream vendors, opportunities that simply hadn't existed previously. Tudor's persistent gamble had paid off spectacularly. But behind this considerable international success stood an enormous, physically demanding workforce, laboring through brutal winter conditions to actually harvest the ice that made this entire global operation genuinely possible. What did it actually take to harvest enough ice to supply an entire global trading empire? Along Maine's Kennebec River, dozens of workers spread across thick frozen surfaces each winter, marking precise grid lines before horse-drawn plows cut deep, systematic grooves into the ice below. Imagine standing on that frozen river at dawn, considerable specialized equipment surrounding you, breath visible in freezing air, knowing your entire day's demanding physical labor would eventually reach families you would genuinely never meet, scattered across entirely different continents. Workers then used long-handled saws to separate individual blocks, guiding them carefully through open water channels toward mechanical conveyor systems that lifted the floating ice steadily toward massive storage facilities along the riverbank. This was genuinely demanding, physically dangerous work. Workers occasionally slipped on treacherous surfaces, colleagues rushing immediately to help pull them from frigid water below. Entire boomtowns sprang up around this seasonal industry. Local merchants and support businesses thriving alongside the considerable seasonal workforce. Search ice harvesting industry history today, and you'll discover this once massive American industry employed thousands of workers throughout numerous New England communities. An entire regional economy built around cutting, storing, and shipping frozen water. Here's something genuinely worth considering. Even during the American Civil War, when southern regions found themselves completely cut off from northern ice supplies, New England's harvesting operations actually continued expanding to meet growing wartime demand. That's how thoroughly ice had become woven into ordinary American daily life by this point. By the post-war period, this industry reached its genuine historical peak, massive ice houses filling steadily with each winter's accumulated harvest, ready for shipment toward Tudor's expanding international network. Thousands of seasonal workers depended directly upon this demanding, physically dangerous labor. An entire regional economy built quite literally upon frozen water. It's a genuinely underappreciated chapter of American industrial history, workers braving harsh winter conditions to supply comfort and preservation for people they would never actually meet. Scattered across countries and continents, most of them would never personally visit. That considerable harvest was now heading toward destinations spanning the entire globe. Just how far did New England ice actually travel during this remarkable commercial era? Calcutta, Rio de Janeiro, Havana, Singapore. By the mid-19th century, Tudor's shipping network connected frozen American lakes directly toward dozens of considerable destinations, spanning multiple continents entirely. Picture the logistics required here: precise timing across multiple oceans, careful insulation calculated for varying voyage lengths, and considerable coordination between harvesters, shippers, and destination merchants. who had genuinely never met one another in person. In Calcutta, local physicians incorporated imported ice increasingly into medical treatment. This reliable cooling resource proving genuinely valuable throughout demanding tropical health challenges. In Rio de Janeiro, wealthy urban residents eagerly secured regular shipments, building dedicated ice houses to support this valuable international relationship. In Havana, local entrepreneurs launched thriving ice cream and chilled beverage businesses. Entirely new commercial ventures made possible directly through this reliable supply chain. Here's a genuinely fascinating question worth considering. How does an ordinary commodity like frozen water become a genuine instrument of globalization, decades before anyone used that particular word? Boston shipping offices managed increasingly complex international logistics, coordinating numerous simultaneous shipments across considerable distances toward dozens of established, regular markets worldwide. Competing American ice companies launched their own international networks, this expanding competition reflecting the industry's genuine, widely recognized commercial viability. Search ice trade globalization today, and business historians will tell you this represents one of the 19th century's most surprising, underappreciated examples of long-distance perishable commodity trading. Decades before refrigerated shipping made such transport genuinely routine. Think about it this way: an entire generation of people across completely different cultures, climates, and continents experienced their very first taste of genuine cold refreshment because one persistent American entrepreneur refused to accept an early, humiliating failure. That's a remarkable legacy for something as ordinary as frozen pond water. But this massive natural ice empire, however impressive, remained genuinely vulnerable. Somewhere in a modest Florida laboratory, one determined physician was quietly developing something that would eventually make the entire natural ice trade completely, permanently obsolete. Could a doctor treating yellow fever patients actually invent mechanical refrigeration, just trying to keep his hospital ward cool? In 1842 Florida, Dr. John Gorrie genuinely did exactly that. Frustrated by unreliable, expensive natural ice shipments during his desperate effort to comfort fever-stricken patients throughout Florida's brutal tropical heat. Picture the sheer irony here. A doctor desperately trying to cool feverish patients ends up accidentally inventing the exact technology that would eventually put an entire established, wealthy global industry completely out of business within just a few decades. Gorrie designed a mechanical compressor system carefully, testing whether controlled expansion and compression of air might genuinely produce reliable cooling without depending entirely on unpredictable natural ice deliveries. After considerable experimentation, his apparatus succeeded, producing measurable cooling that provided genuine relief for his suffering hospital patients. Then, on July 14, 1844, during a festive Bastille Day celebration in Apalachicola, Gorrie demonstrated his invention publicly, chilling wine for astonished festival guests, using nothing but his mechanical apparatus. No natural ice whatsoever involved. Guests were genuinely delighted, unable to distinguish this artificial cooling from traditional harvested ice at all. Here's the genuinely tragic twist to this story. Despite securing a formal patent, Gorrie struggled desperately to find investors. Potential backers remained skeptical, questioning whether artificial ice could possibly compete against the established, considerably profitable natural ice trading industry. Gorrie died in relative poverty and obscurity. His genuinely visionary invention commercially unsuccessful throughout his own difficult lifetime. Search who invented refrigeration today, and Gorrie's name appears prominently, decades after his death, finally receiving genuine historical recognition his own era denied him completely. Subsequent engineers built directly upon his foundational mechanical principles, gradually developing increasingly reliable, genuinely commercially viable refrigeration systems throughout the following decades. It's a sobering reminder worth remembering: being right and being commercially successful aren't always the same thing. Gorrie's vision was genuinely correct. It simply arrived several decades before the broader world was truly ready to embrace it. and before the technology itself had matured sufficiently to fulfill his ambitious original promise. What happens to an entire massive industry when superior technology finally, inevitably arrives? By the late 19th century, New England's once thriving ice harvesting operations found considerably fewer workers gathering across frozen lakes each winter. Mechanical refrigeration steadily eroding their long-standing, dominant commercial position. Consider how genuinely disorienting this must have felt for lifelong ice harvesters. An entire regional identity, built across multiple generations of considerable seasonal expertise, gradually rendered unnecessary by machines that simply never needed a frozen lake at all. Mechanical facilities expanded steadily, offering businesses something the natural ice trade simply couldn't match: genuine, reliable year-round production entirely independent from unpredictable weather and considerable seasonal harvesting limitations. Local businesses increasingly preferred this dependable alternative, and previously bustling ice harvesting boomtowns grew considerably quieter as demand steadily declined. Here's a question worth genuinely reflecting on quite. How quickly can a massive, seemingly permanent industry disappear once genuinely superior technology arrives? Faster than most people expect, it turns out. New England Ice Company executives reviewed declining financial records with mounting, genuine concern. Some companies adapting by pivoting directly toward mechanical refrigeration themselves, recognizing pragmatic wisdom in embracing rather than fighting this inevitable transformation. Ordinary American households began installing compact mechanical iceboxes, genuinely appreciating reliable cooling that no longer depended on seasonal ice deliveries at all. Within merely a few decades, mechanical refrigeration dominated commercial ice production almost entirely. The once massive natural harvesting industry reduced toward a small, genuinely diminished remaining sector. Search technological disruption history today, and business historians frequently cite this exact transformation as a genuinely instructive early example. An entire established industry displaced steadily by superior technology within remarkably few historical decades. It's a pattern that would repeat again and again throughout subsequent industrial history. Though rarely with quite this dramatic a beginning, an industry built literally on frozen water, defeated by machines that could simply make cold whenever needed. Tudor's remarkable global empire, built through genuine persistence and audacious commercial vision, had run its full historical course. But its legacy was only just beginning, quietly setting the stage for cold's genuinely universal arrival inside every single ordinary household kitchen. How did refrigeration go from Gorrie's mocked, unsuccessful invention towards something in nearly every kitchen on Earth within a single century? By the 1920s, American manufacturing facilities were assembling considerable quantities of household electric refrigerators systematically. This expanding mass production finally meeting genuine, growing consumer demand for reliable domestic cooling. Picture the sheer scale of this shift. Within a single human lifetime, an entire population moved from depending on horse-drawn ice deliveries towards simply opening a humming metal box in their own kitchen whenever they wanted something cold. Salesmen demonstrated these new appliances confidently toward interested young couples, explaining their genuine convenience compared toward traditional, considerably less reliable icebox. Families gathered excitedly around their new refrigerators, delighted by this considerable modern convenience finally available within their own ordinary household kitchen. Around this same period, inventor Clarence Birdseye developed something equally transformative: quick freezing technology that preserved food's original texture and flavor considerably better than traditional, slower freezing methods ever allowed. Birdseye's frozen food products spread rapidly through American grocery stores, and combined with widespread refrigeration adoption, genuinely transformed how ordinary households stored, prepared, and consumed food entirely. Here's something genuinely worth pausing on. Within merely a few decades, refrigeration went from rare luxury towards something children simply took completely for granted. Unable to imagine a world where families once depended entirely on delivered natural ice, grandmothers explained this now unfamiliar historical practice to genuinely astonished grandchildren, examining old photographs of ice harvesting and delivery like relics from an entirely different era. Search History of the Refrigerator today, and you'll find historians consistently describing this transformation as one of modern history's most significant, underappreciated domestic revolutions, fundamentally reshaping food storage, meal preparation, and household daily routine throughout the entire modernizing world. From ancient Persian desert towers through Tudor's audacious global trade toward this genuinely universal domestic appliance, humanity's relationship with cold had traveled an extraordinary distance. And yet, remarkably, this wasn't the final destination. Cold's story was about to expand into territory even ancient Persian engineers could never possibly have imagined. Laboratories, cryogenics, dumb ice, and the very edges of modern medical science itself. Could extreme cold eventually help preserve human organs, embryos, or even entire human bodies for the future? Modern cryogenics laboratories are actively exploring exactly this question, using liquid nitrogen to preserve biological samples at temperatures far beyond anything ancient civilizations, or even Frederic Tudor himself, could have possibly imagined. If there's one single thread worth carrying away from this entire documentary, let it be this. Humanity has spent its entire recorded history chasing the exact same simple goal, keeping things cold, and every single solution, from desert towers to frozen ships to humming kitchen appliances, traces back to that same prehistoric hunter's accidental discovery. Medical researchers now preserve donor organs and embryos using sophisticated cryogenic technology, extending precious tissue viability considerably longer than conventional refrigeration alone ever allowed. More experimentally, cryonics researchers explore whether extreme cold might eventually preserve biological tissue for genuinely extended future application. An ambitious, honestly still uncertain scientific frontier. Meanwhile, in Antarctica, climate scientists drill deep into ancient ice sheets, extracting cylindrical core samples containing thousands of years of accumulated snowfall. Trapped within tiny air bubbles inside this ancient ice lies genuine, direct atmospheric evidence from Earth's distant climatic past. Information now helping researchers understand our planet's long-term climate patterns with remarkable, unprecedented precision. Here's a genuinely striking thought worth considering. The same substance prehistoric humans once discovered accidentally preserved meat is now helping scientists understand our planet's entire climatic history, and potentially humanity's own medical future. That's an extraordinary journey for something so ordinary, so completely unremarkable, sitting quietly in your own kitchen freezer right now. Ice still brings us genuine, simple joy to skaters, gliding gracefully across smooth arena surfaces. Artists carving genuinely beautiful temporary sculptures from massive blocks. Children building snowmen exactly as curious ancestors once marveled at rare hailstones falling from a warm equatorial sky. From a prehistoric hunter examining frozen meat, through Persian desert towers, through Tudor's audacious global gamble, through Gorrie's overlooked genius, all the way toward your own kitchen refrigerator and cutting-edge cryogenic research today. Ice has quietly shaped nearly everything we eat, everywhere we've traveled, and how long we've managed to stay alive. This ordinary, everyday substance was never simply frozen water. It was always, quietly, one of history's most genuinely transformative forces.